It was supposed to be just another quiet night in the woods, the kind where the darkness feels familiar instead of threatening. But for some people, that night turned into something they still can't explain, something that follows them years later. Across North America, stories of massive, shadowy figures watching from tree lines or moving across rooftops have circulated for decades. Some are whispered around campfires, others are told with shaking voices into recorders, and a few are shared only after years of silence. These are 7 of the most frightening Bigfoot encounters ever reported, each one leaving behind the same haunting question: what exactly is out there? One man from rural Oregon says the sound woke him first. He lived alone in an old trailer parked at the edge of a logging road, miles from the nearest neighbor. Around 2 in the morning, he heard what he thought was a branch scraping across the metal roof. Then it happened again, slower this time, heavier. He sat up in bed and listened as the roof creaked under what sounded like weight shifting back and forth. That's when the footsteps started. Not small, not light, but deliberate, heavy steps moving from one end of the trailer to the other. The walls vibrated with each step. He reached for his flashlight and pointed it at the ceiling, half expecting to see dents forming in the metal. Suddenly, everything went silent. No footsteps, no movement, just the hum of the forest outside. When he finally worked up the courage to step outside at dawn, he found massive hand-shaped impressions pressed into the dusty side of the trailer, far higher than any human could reach. Another encounter comes from a pair of hunters in Northern California who were deep in the forest tracking deer. As the sun started to set, they noticed something pacing them parallel through the trees. At first, they assumed it was a bear, but whatever it was moved too smoothly, too upright. Every time they stopped, it stopped. Every time they moved, it moved. One of the men raised his rifle and shouted, expecting the animal to flee. Instead, a massive shape stepped into a small clearing. It stood well over 7 feet tall, covered in dark hair, with shoulders so broad they seemed almost unnatural. The men described its eyes as deeply set and intelligent, not animalistic. Without making a sound, it turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees with a speed that left both men frozen in place, unable to explain what they had just seen. In the Appalachian Mountains, a woman driving home late from work encountered something she still refuses to name out loud. As she rounded a sharp bend on a rural road, her headlights caught a tall figure standing in the middle of the lane. She slammed on the brakes, stopping just feet away. The figure didn't flinch. It slowly turned its head toward her, revealing a flat, dark face framed by thick hair. She described the smell as the worst part, a strong, musky odor that filled her car even with the windows up. Suddenly, it stepped off the road and into the trees in a single stride, clearing a ditch that would have taken a human several steps to cross. She sat there for nearly 10 minutes before she could force herself to drive again, convinced that if she turned the engine off, it would come back. One of the most chilling encounters comes from a family camping near Mount Hood. Late at night, their children began screaming from inside the tent. The parents rushed over and found deep handprints pressed into the tent fabric, stretching the material inward as if something had been trying to grab them. Outside, they heard heavy footsteps circling the campsite, followed by low, guttural sounds that didn't resemble any known animal. The father fired a warning shot into the air, and the sounds abruptly stopped. In the morning, they found massive footprints surrounding the campsite, some measuring nearly 18 inches long. Rangers later dismissed it as a bear, but the family insists no bear walks upright or leaves footprints shaped like a human foot. In British Columbia, a group of teenagers learned how quickly curiosity can turn into terror. While filming a prank video near an abandoned logging area, they noticed something moving at the edge of their camera frame. At first, they thought it was another person messing with them, until the figure stepped into view. It towered over the logging equipment, its arms hanging nearly to its knees. One of the teens laughed nervously and shouted at it, but the laughter stopped when the creature let out a roar so loud it caused the ground beneath them to vibrate. The camera shook violently as they ran, and the footage cuts out as a large shadow rushes toward them. They never returned to retrieve the equipment they left behind. A former park ranger from Washington State shared his experience only after retirement, fearing ridicule during his career. While patrolling a remote area after reports of vandalized cabins, he found one structure completely torn apart. Doors ripped off hinges, furniture smashed, and deep claw-like marks gouged into solid wood. As he documented the damage, he heard movement behind him. Turning around, he came face to face with a massive figure standing just beyond the tree line. He described feeling an overwhelming sense of being watched, evaluated. The creature didn't attack or threaten him. It simply stared, then slowly backed away into the forest. The ranger later admitted that nothing in his training prepared him for that moment, and he avoided that area for the rest of his career. The final encounter comes from Alaska, where isolation magnifies every fear. A group of construction workers staying in temporary housing near a remote job site began noticing food disappearing at night. One evening, they decided to stay awake and watch. Around midnight, they saw a large silhouette move between the buildings. As it approached, they realized it wasn't a person. It stood nearly 8 feet tall and moved with eerie silence despite its size. One worker shined a spotlight on it, and the creature turned, revealing eyes that reflected the light like an animal's. Instead of fleeing, it stepped closer, stopping just outside the circle of light. After several seconds, it turned and vanished into the darkness. The workers reported hearing heavy footsteps on the roofs for weeks afterward. Whether you believe these encounters are evidence of an undiscovered species or manifestations of fear in the wilderness, one thing is certain: the people who experienced them are deeply affected. They didn't go looking for Bigfoot. They weren't trying to prove anything. They were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, left with memories that still wake them in the middle of the night. And if even a fraction of these stories are true, then something large, intelligent, and unknown may still be watching from the shadows, waiting for the next unlucky soul to cross its path. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and share, because the woods are vast, the nights are long, and there are many more stories waiting to be told.